Hello, welcome to XClam Chess. In this video, I'm going to be going over a game that was submitted to me by a user on chess.com. His username is CleverOak. And so I'm going to be going over his game and seeing if there's anything about his play that I can learn from this to try to help him improve. Okay, so this game he was playing as the black pieces in a 15-minute game. And to give you an idea of his playing strengths, he is rated about 500. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so his opponent played g3, and he played g6 back, bishop g2, bishop g7, just putting the bishops on the long diagonals. Here his opponent plays f4. This move is a little bit questionable because he's weakening the king side early, and weakening this diagonal early on can sometimes lead to problems, because you should never really move the f-pawn early on unless you have a good reason. I feel like this was a little bit unnecessary. Okay, knight to h6. Usually when developing a knight, it is recommended that you move them closer to the center, because they can have a better reach. And so one thing that I would recommend here for CleverOak is to maybe try developing his knight closer to the center, because here on h6 it doesn't have an impact on the center of the board. But if this knight were on f6, it could help to influence e4 and d5. So I think that this knight will be a little bit more well placed here on f6. Okay, so e3 is played. I feel like it might have been a better idea to just go ahead and push this pawn to e4, because on e4 it would be helping to control some more of the center, whereas on e3 it is making way for this knight to come out to e2 later, but the e2 square would be available after either e3 or e4, and the only difference being that e4 would help to control the center a little bit better. Okay, c6. So this is cutting down the bishop's diagonal a little bit. Okay, and knight to e2. Okay, queen to c2. So one other thing that I would suggest after seeing this move, queen to c2, is before developing your queen, usually it's a better idea to develop your minor pieces like your bishops and knights first, because a lot of the times you don't really know where the queen wants to be until after the other pieces have been deployed. So maybe it would be a better idea to hold back on developing your queen until you get out your bishops and knights. Okay, so castling kingside and knight to a6. Again, a knight on the rim, they say, is dim. So with knights on a6 and h6, these knights are a little bit off to the side. So one thing in the future that I would highly recommend is trying to make sure they're a little bit more centrally placed. Because though they're on h6 and a6, these knights can't be as effective as they would be on, say, c6 and f6. Okay, knight b to c3, b6, b3, bishop to b7, bishop b2, castling. Okay, that's a good move. Getting the king out of the center, and now these rooks are connected, so he's completing his development. e4. Okay, so now this move has kind of wasted a little bit of time for white, because he's played e3 and then e4. So he could have saved himself a move by playing e4 at once earlier. And in chess, you want to use every move to the fullest. And when you're taking two moves to play a move that you could do in one move, you're wasting a whole tempo that you could be doing something important with. And so this just winds up wasting a little bit of time that white could be using. King to h8. Okay, right here, the king doesn't really necessarily need to be moved. He's pretty good here on g8. And what you could have been doing with this move is maybe trying to improve your pieces. Some of these pieces aren't the happiest where they are. Like this bishop, yes, it's on this long diagonal, but this diagonal isn't open. So maybe, like, if c5 was played, you could open this diagonal for this bishop. Or maybe start working on trying to relocate your knights on the side so that they're more centrally placed and can have an impact on the game. Okay, and here f5 is played. And black plays g takes f5. So I'm going to go back one move. Right here, white's attacking on the wing by starting to play towards the black king with his pawns and trying to open up this castled king's position. However, I don't know if a wing attack is completely justified, because what black could do here is whenever your opponent is attacking on the wing, usually a counterattack in the center with something like d5 can kind of shatter any wing attack, because the center is the main area of the game. And so if black could counterattack in the center and get control of the middle of the board, then any wing attack that black has, that black is faced with, won't really matter, because he'll have control of the center of the board and will be able to defend any attack that comes his way. G takes f5, e takes f5, and here e6. So one thing to think about whenever you're pushing a pawn is you need to think about what square that pawn is giving up. Because pawns can never move backwards. So that means once that pawn moves forward, it can never go back to defend that square again. And after e6 is played, f6 is weakened. And right here, white could play f6 and then trap in this bishop on g7 and then win it. However, it was lucky for black that white didn't realize this and played f takes e5. And then here, black recaptures with d takes e6. I may have considered capturing with the f-pawn, because if I were to capture with the f-pawn, I would say, well, now I have an extra center pawn. I have two center pawns instead of one. And those pawns can later advance and help to control the center of the board. And also now, my rook's on this open file, whereas before it was sitting behind a pawn. So now, that's a little bit of an improvement for my rook. Okay, so d4 is played next. e5, d takes e5, bishop takes e5, bishop to a3, and then right here, black makes a mistake here. He plays bishop takes a1. So this move, white doesn't actually catch this immediately, but there's actually a checkmate here in 5 if white were to play queen takes a1 the best that black could do is delay this mate with moves like f6, and then the queen taking, king to g8, and then after bishop takes f6, black has too many threats he has to deal with. He has to prevent queen to g7 mate, and he also has to prevent the queen from coming down. And so this queen can't stop both threats. Say the queen goes back to d8 to defend the one threat, queen to g7, checkmate would happen. And if the queen goes back, or yet the queen just stays on this row here to prevent queen to g7, then queen to f8, rook takes, and then here we have a different checkmate. So yeah, luckily white didn't realize this and played after bishop takes a1, bishop takes f6, h6. Okay, and so here black could retreat his bishop and prevent any of those threats from happening. Instead, he maybe doesn't see this because it is a long checkmate to find. It's 4 moves now, and now we see that start to happen. We see this happen now. This now 4-move checkmate. And it could be delayed with moves like f6, but that is only delaying the checkmate. And so black plays king to g8, and then we see this checkmate. Okay, so this is unfortunate for CleverOak, but this game does have some good teaching points that we can learn from it. So probably the biggest thing that I would recommend is trying to make sure your pieces are more centrally placed, like your knights. Keep them in the middle of the board where they can have a greater impact on the game. Knights aren't very fast pieces, so they like to find a good square closer to the center of the board and just sit there and kind of control the board a lot. And then that's usually how knights can be pretty useful. Okay, so that's all for this video. That brings it to an end. Thanks for watching, and thank you for submitting this game.